year after year, as long as they're rated for our zones or the zone that you're in. And this, I mean, this seminar, this webinar is basically for anyone in any growing area. So what we up north have is going to be a little different than what they have down south, but the principles of the life cycles of the plants is the same. So there's
Yeah.
always annuals, there's always biennials, there's always perennials. So these are going to come back year after year. All the foliage is going to die back in the fall. And when I was a beginner gardener, I didn't know either. Again, the frost comes, all the hostas go, oh, and the leaves all melt away. And then the spring comes, and now they're starting to come back up again. They look like these little shoots. And it's like, oh, look, I didn't kill it. Well, no, because typically it just dies back at ground level, and then they regrow again. And so this is one reason I like to do cleanup in the spring and not the fall, because I can remember where things are when I see the leaves or if I see the stems.
Right. Yeah.
I have some clients that prefer to do all their cleanup in the fall, and then if I go to work in their garden, I don't remember necessarily what they planted there unless I took pictures,
Right.
or I wait until it's more the growing season. And I can start to see things kind of sprout up a little bit and say, "Oh, that's probably a plant. I'm not gonna step there."
Yeah. So like
Um,
my, I think it's called bluebell. That's a
yeah,
perennial. And so the first year it didn't do real well. It's the second year that it does better. Is that true, or it mine just
yeah.
happened to do better?
That's what I was going to tell you next is that perennials, they typically sleep the first year, they creep the second year, and then they leap the third year. So they creep, sleep,
Yeah. So the flowers were
leap.
beautiful last
Yeah.
year, and I can't remember if last year was my second or third year of it.
Yeah.
So I'm
And the
looking
first
forward, and I
year,
can already see them coming up now. So I'm
mhm.
excited to see what I'm going to get this year.
Yeah, that first year, they're just like, oh my gosh, what is going on? I'm in some different place. They're kind of getting acclimated to the environment. They're starting to send out a little bit of roots, maybe they'll send a little bit more stems up. But um, they won't necessarily have a lot of growth going on. Oh, we just had
Okay.
somebody
So
else join.
tell me again: sleep, creep, and what's the third?
Yeah, perennials, they're going to
Yeah.
take 3 years to mature to their full sizes that they say on the tags. So the
Yeah.
first year that you plant a perennial, it's going to sleep
Yeah.
because it's getting the roots developed and stuff. Then it's going to creep.
Yeah.
So you start seeing a little bit more growth. And then it's going to leap that third year.
Leap. Yeah.
That third year, perennials are going to leap.
Yeah.
And so when you go to plant a perennial, it'll tell you the spacing, and people say, but if I plant all these perennials so far apart, like a foot apart, and they've got like these little 4-inch starter pots a foot apart, they're
Yeah.
like, but there's so many spaces. Yeah, you're gonna need that the third year. You don't need it the first 2 years. So a lot of times, what I would do when I plant perennials is I would so let's say, yeah, there you go. All right. Let's say, oh, I'll go one more. Each square is a foot.
Okay.
Now I'm going to put one perennial here, and it's only 4 inches, 4-inch pot. Because we don't want to spend a lot of money because these are going to come back every year and year. We don't want to buy the big ones that cost $25 necessarily. Okay, that's fine. So we're going to put perennials in each square foot here of perennials. Now we've got a whole lot of space. So what'll happen is with all of this space, anytime we leave space, nature wants to, oh, it's backward, it's mirrored.
Fill it.
Anytime we have space, nature wants to grow. We never want to leave space in our gardens. The other part is that we have to mulch, and we have to mulch kind of heavily because the water will evaporate fast in the spaces, and it also will allow more weed seeds to grow.
Okay.
So we could put mulch down, but after some heavy rains, maybe some dandelion seeds would go down and touch the soil and say, oh, this is wonderful. I'm going to grow. So what I like to do is plant perennials maybe a foot apart, but then I'm going to plant annuals in between. Here's an annual. Nope, that's not an annual. Never mind. All right, so here's an annual, 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 annual. Maybe I'll put a couple annuals in between these. And what I want them to do is I want them to fill in all that space because an annual is going to grow and grow and grow and grow. Remember, it's going to live all its whole lifestyle from the beginning of the growing season to the end of the growing season or hard frosts, whatever that might be for whatever region that you're in. And it's going to go nuts. It's going to fill this whole space in. So here's an example I like to give. I have a space out in the front of my yard by my mailbox, and I had planted like purple cone flowers and black-eyed Susans and asters and things like that. And again, it was the first year and they were so cute and they were so small. And I said, "Oh, I've got a lot of room here. I got a lot of space. I'm going to try plant some, what did I grow? Squash." And did I try watermelon? Oh, pumpkins. I grew pumpkins and I grew squash and I grew delicata squash, which is a vining kind of squash. And they filled in the whole area. And I would have to go around and kind of weed around my poor little perennials. Their heads are like, hey, what's going on? Because the squash leaves and the pumpkin leaves are way up here. But the good thing is, they were around friends. Plants have a sensitivity to each other, they need friends around. So, one, they're around plant life. Two, their roots were shaded. The root part was shaded. Three, I don't know if you can see the three, this three. Okay. Three is that when the water came, and it came from the sky, it landed, and because the ground was shaded, it stayed in those areas. So it enriched the growth of the perennials. They're a lot happier having all of those annuals around them. So beginner gardeners typically will say, well, I just want to plant once and be done with it. And it's like, I would love to do that too, but that's not how it works. You will
Yeah.
be happier if your plants are happier. And by planting annuals around the perennials, it's a lot more manageable. And so the perennials will sleep the first year, creep the second year. So you've got 2 years of annuals. Annuals also tend to be a lot more colorful, like your coleus that you talked about. Those have
Right.
tons of color. They're
Yeah.
a lot more colorful because their growing season's shorter. They have to be colorful and they got to attract what they need to make those seeds and make those fruit. So you could have all kinds of color all up in here besides what you've got for your perennials. The other part is when you plant that perennial that's in flower, I told you to do something that we don't like to do. Do you remember what that was?
When you do what now? Ask the
When
question.
you when you
Gabby
plant
was getting
the
me.
plant that's in flower, the flowering plant,
Oh,
when
you
you
need
first
to
plant
cut
it,
it. You need to prune it, deadhead it.
right? That's terrible. We don't like that. So if I had planted all, cone flowers and I think I had bee balm in there too. I had all these beautiful things in here. I'm like, oh, it's going to be so pretty. No, 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 no. It will be pretty, but for the
Eventually.
first year, I had to cut their heads off because I want the roots to form first. I want those roots to get developed and established. And they're going to do that better when they're not worried about making flowers so that I can make my seeds so I can reproduce. Because that's all they want to do is reproduce.
And this is
So,
how you get
yes,
around that.
you do not have to spend a fortune to have a garden, to have a really beautiful garden. You just have to give it a little bit of thought. So like if you, some people will buy the really big pots of the perennials, the ones that are like this big around, and they
Right.
are like, I think last year they were like $25 a pot, and it
Yeah.
was exorbitant. So if this is six perennials you want to plant, $25 a pot, you got $150. That's just for six plants. That's a lot of money to put down versus you can get 4-inch pots that might cost, I think they were going for like maybe $10, I think. So now you're spending $60 with perennials. You know they're not going to do anything anyway for a little while. Whether it's a big pot or whether it's something small, it's not going to grow for a little while.
Right.
But once it does grow, so that first year and the second year, you can put the annuals around it. That third year, though, forget about it because now your perennials are. I'm taking the annuals out for a minute.
They're much bigger.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So these are foot squares. Now your perennials are all at least taking up the whole area. Then you don't have room for anything else. And they might even grow more. And they might grow wider in a vase shape. They might creep along the ground more. They might be the kind that like kind of float outward. So now they don't have room for those annuals. But they have really good roots. They had all the water they needed. The nutrients would fall. If a bird flew by, pooped, it would land on those other annual leaves and eventually it would get into the soil. The other part with leaving the space is when it rains really, really hard, um, the water tends to run right off. It's not slowed down when there's a lot of space in between your plants. So you could actually have your mulch washed away, or the water wouldn't actually get into the ground. It just would run off. But if you have plant life in between those perennials, you're going to
Right.
capture that water. It's going to slow it down enough for the plants to use it.
Cool.
Okay. So just looking at my notes real quick. Oh yeah. So when they get to be this big, you might end up having to divide them out that year or for sure the following year. Because people will say, "Oh, well, don't plant that because then you'll have to divide it. Don't plant that because it's going to take over." Well, this is kind of what they mean. So
Kind of like hostas.
kind of like hostas.
Yeah.
But I mean, dividing them up is super easy. It's just good to know like when to do it when it's the easiest. Like
Right.
I wouldn't want to divide up hostas in the fall when all the leaves are everywhere. I wouldn't want to do that. I'd want to wait until the spring when I first start seeing the shoots. I would dig the whole clump up, put it in a wheelbarrow, slice them up, and distribute them where they need to go.
That
And
was
then
something I learned.
yeah, so now let's pretend that the novice gardener has planted 4 perennials in a square foot because now there's no space. There's too much. There was too much space. So now you've got a foot full of perennials that are all going to grow a foot, and it's going to be a mess later.
Yeah. You
Yeah,
will have to separate.
yeah. So you want to, if you're going to plant just perennials, make sure you got a lot of space in between them. And the other part is that an annual, if you plant annuals, they would be okay with like a liquid fertilizer because it's just one growing season. They don't care as much about the soil. That's not as crucial. Versus a perennial, a perennial is more like you're bringing baby home. Like you want the soil to be a decent kind of soil, well draining, in the right environment. Like hostas, they like shade best. You'll get less disease issues or insect issues if you're in the shade than you would in the sun. Um, so you want the right conditions for perennials before you kind of bring them home. Or if you brought it home, then you have to think about where in my yard is this going to work best. So you might
Yeah.
have to amend the soil. There is annual upkeep. So in the spring, you're going to want to probably get rid of the dead foliage and just let them grow up. Um, you can deadhead perennials as well, and still continue to get blooms because the plant says, well, wait a minute, I'm supposed to make seeds. I'm supposed to make seeds. But because they die at the hard frost above ground anyway, sometimes what you can do is just leave like the stems up like a sculpture, a little bit like a sculpture in the wintertime.
Okay.
Well, the other part is if you feel bad about cutting their heads off, then you could take advantage of those flowers and you could do the tataki zomi, where you do the flower pounding and get the flower dye into cloth so you can preserve it. You could dry them out. You can microwave them now to dry them out.
Serious?
Oh, it's so fun. It's so fun. You could cut the blooms off at the stems and you could bring them in vases. You can give them to friends, whatever. What I typically do at my place now is I will, after I cut their heads off, I just kind of leave the flowers on the ground so there is color available for wildlife that's like flying by. So they can see what's available to them. That way, when the flowers start actually blooming again, then they will be able to take advantage of it because they'll know where to go. And so I'm reminded of what bloom colors they are. So, like there's a bee balm I love to grow. It is like a bright red, and it's called Jacob Klein bee balm, and it gets like 3 foot tall. But the hummingbirds love it. I mean, and they will literally go to like if this is the flower head, I'm looking at it from the top, from the sky. The hummingbirds will actually go to this tubular flower. They'll go to this tubular flower. They're almost like very exact about I can't miss a flower. They actually go all the way around the flower heads to get to the nectar, and I love them. But if I planted that and then cut the blooms off and forgot what color that was, it might clash. It would clash with pink, or it would clash with like it might clash with like a faded yellow, you know. So I have to think about what the color scheme is and not just pop them all in and say, oh, look at there, without
Yeah.
knowing. And the other part of that is that you plan and plan like I like to plan for 4 season color and 4 season interest. And so I would have I have gardens that I got great blooms in the spring, in the late spring, in the summer, in the late summer, in the fall. And then some of the seasons that we would have, I think 3 years ago we had like 80-degree temperatures first thing in April or something like that. It's something very strange, very warm temperatures. And I'm like, Mother Nature, you're messing up my flower schemes, my color schemes. Because lots of things were blooming at the same time. I was like, oh, that's gross. No.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So that's what you get with perennials too, is you get the long lasting, you get to divide them up, which is kind of nice. So you get free plants versus annuals, you would get free seeds if you save the seeds. But they don't bloom as often as annuals do, so you don't get as much color bang for the buck. And you got to really kind of plan, you know, when one is like the star versus the next one is the star the next month or the next week, things like that. Click on the video for the next portion of Know Better, Grow Better. And if you enjoyed this, share it with a friend and consider subscribing to the channel for more. Thanks so much for watching.